you, Karen. And everyone else?
Hello.
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 Morning.
Okay, so we officially have to record this and post it on WCTV, Ryan, right?
You got it.
Okay, so since we don't have a chairperson right now, we should probably have a roll call and just say who's here. Oh, we have to read this, right?
Do you want me to read this, Carrie?
Sure.
Pursuant to Governor Baker's COVID-19 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GL Chapter 30A, Section 18, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, members of the public who wish to watch and listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner. This meeting of the Cable Television Advisory Task Force is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Members of the public who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may also do so via telephone by dialing 1-646-558-8656 and enter meeting ID 824-7294-4335, then press pound and press pound again at the next voice prompt. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the meeting designated for public comment by following the steps previously noted and pressing *9 on the telephone keypad. This will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. All callers using this feature will be placed in a queue in the order they enter the prompt. In the event that, despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide for real-time access, we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as we are able.
Okay, so we should have a roll call. George Breslin?
Here.
Karen Campbell?
Here.
Carrie Colburn Dion, I'm here. Ken Lord?
Here.
John O'Neill?
Here.
And Ryan Mylar.
Here, I want to point out my name was spelled incorrectly in that agenda.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. I will fix it. And William Hewig from KP Law. All right, so we should probably organize first. Does anyone want to be the chair? I know that minutes are always a tough thing, so I will offer to take the minutes because it's public meetings. No one wants to be chair. Okay, I'll be chair if no one wants to be. I will volunteer to do that and take the minutes.
I'm not able to serve as chair, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Would you like me to make a nomination that Carrie is the chair?
Sure.
Okay, I nominate Carrie Colburn Dion to be the chair of this committee.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay. I think we have to do it by roll call since we're on TV, right? George Breslin?
Yes.
Karen Campbell?
Yes.
I'll say yes. Ken Lord?
Yes.
John O'Neill?
Yes.
And Ryan? You're
Yes.
a non-voting member, but we'll let you
Yes.
put input. And I will take the notes, so I'll have to look at the recordings because I'm not going to be able to do both at once, but that will be okay. Okay, now we can get into our overview of the process. And Bill, could you help us with that?
Certainly. I looked at your licenses online before the meeting, and you have a Comcast license up in 2028 and a Verizon license up in 2022. I assume we are gathering for the Verizon renewal, which will be in, let's see, a little less than a year from now, February 25th, 2022, so about 9 months. The process is called ascertainment. You've been through it before, I assume, for the Comcast renewal in 2018, and maybe some of you or all of you participated in that. The process that I'm sure you undertook was the similar one I'm going to talk about, and that is that in cable television negotiations, the burden, if you will, or the obligation to go forward and make a proposal rests with the town. It's not the cable company's obligation to give you a first offer or a first proposal, although they often do that. And they do it in the form of a licensed draft that's exactly the same as the one you've got now, or sometimes in the case of Comcast, they just leave the numbers blank and you fill it in later. Our task is ascertainment, and that means we need to determine what the town's future needs will be, identify those, justify them, and then put them forward to Verizon in the form of a written business plan or a proposal or budgets and equipment lists in any event. So that's our task. We have to figure out what it is we want and need over the presumptive renewal term for the Verizon license. Some of you may know, but Verizon is only giving 5-year licenses out now. I don't know why. I've never got a sufficient explanation from them. They insist that they're still high in the cable industry and they want to stay as a player in the cable business, but we all have our suspicions about that. In any event, we'll get a 5-year license from Verizon and that's it. So it'll be from 22 to 27, and that actually will interface nicely with your Verizon renewal in 28. So in a way, it's a good thing. Ascertainment consists of a number of different tasks, all of them voluntary except for one. The only thing that you have to have, that you're required to do by law, is to have a public hearing. Usually I recommend the public hearing be at the end of your process and just before you're ready to negotiate, because it makes sense to make a presentation to the public, to the issuing authority that is your select board, and also to the cable company, Verizon, to show them what you want and to justify why you're going to ask for it. The other things that are voluntary are surveys, which you may or may not be interested in. Let's see, what else is voluntary? Surveys, focus groups and things like that are all optional. As far as the written business plan goes, I believe that I sent Carrie sample business plans from other communities, and those all tend to be rather formal and voluminous. We don't necessarily have to do something like that anymore, but what we are looking for is annual operating budgets for your access folks, any annual needs or operating needs that you might have from other communities of interest in town, or needs, for example, from schools, needs from public safety department, the public library, the senior center, that sort of thing. They may have meeting rooms, they may need new cameras, they may have some future community cable related need that you're going to want to identify. So the first part of your job is really outreach to community departments, including the cable access folks, WCTV, but also departments of the town. Do you have any future community cable related needs we can address in a 5-year Verizon license coming up? The process involves reaching out to the community. It also involves conducting a public hearing, and it most specifically involves identifying what your future budget is going to be for access, and maybe other departments in the town, such as schools, if they share a part of the cable proceeds or the license proceeds. And it also involves predicting or identifying capital needs in the future that you might have over the presumptive license term, which is 5 years. So for example, WCTV can, I'm sure, put together a list of equipment needs that it might have over the next 5 years. Identify the equipment that you need to replace or that you need to add, or other forms of capital expenditures. Maybe there's a studio you're going to revamp, maybe there's a studio move planned, that sort of thing. Capital expenditures can be identified and capital expenditures can be listed. And the ultimate goal of all this is that when we are at the end of our ascertainment, we will give to Verizon a list of our annual budgetary needs for the 5 years and a list of capital needs for 5 years and other municipally related cable-related needs that are not necessarily connected to WCTV. So that's our task. And we do this by, as I say, reaching out to municipal departments, and also if you are, you are a cable committee, you are scheduling public hearings or public meetings, I should say. So we do it by inviting people to public meetings to tell us what they might want in the future for the future Verizon license. And then, as I said, we have a public hearing at the end of the process, and then we start to negotiate with Verizon. I think I've covered just about everything in the ascertainment process. As I say, many of you may remember this from Comcast 3 years ago. It's the same process. There is I'll have to take a close look at the licenses, but there may be level playing field issues we have to relate to. That is to say, Comcast may have said, if you give somebody else a renewal license during our term, it's got to be on approximately the same terms and conditions. And it looks to me, when I checked your 2 licenses and saw what you got for annual and what you got for capital, it looks like they might be approximately equivalent now anyway. That is 5% from each. And then capital from Verizon of $381,000 over 15 years, and capital from Comcast of $210,000 over 10 years. I didn't do the math, but they're probably pretty close on an annualized basis. So there is an overview. And I guess there's really 2 things that are our tasks and our goals for ascertainment. And I've really only discussed one so far. One is, what are our future community cable related needs? We will want to put that together in the form of some kind of written document that we submit to Verizon, showing annual budget and capital needs and other needs. The other task we have, and it may not be a particularly big or ardent one, is we are also allowed to determine whether Verizon is in compliance with their current license. And if they're not, now is the time to bring them into compliance. Compliance is the other issue that is before us in renewal. Future needs for the community over the presumptive renewal term, and then compliance, the second prong of a 2-pronged ascertainment process. So in our public hearing, and also maybe in some of our public meetings, we can invite folks to come in and tell us, is Verizon in compliance? Are you getting a clear picture? Do you get clear audio? When you call for customer support or call with complaints or call into the office, are they answering promptly? That sort of thing. There you have an overview. I'll turn it back over to Carrie and be happy to answer any questions you have, but that is kind of a summary of what it is that lies ahead of us.
Thank you so much for that overview. I think that was very good to at least put us on the path of where we need to go over the next few months. Does anyone have any questions?
Bill, is there any benefit to try to co-terminate Comcast with Verizon? I know that Verizon's limiting to 5, and that would require a 6-year deal, but is there any benefit to that, or having them on off years better?
There is a benefit to having the 2 licenses up within a year of each other. And the benefit is that because they both have level playing field clauses in them, I'm assuming that's standard practice for both of them for many years. Because they both have level playing field provisions in them, if the licenses are staggered, you're always bidding against yourself, if you will. You're always trying to renegotiate the last license. It's very difficult to get an increase in your case. It would be an increase in capital, because 5% is the maximum you can get for annual operating funding. But capital, there's, you can get more of that, but it's difficult to get it if the other guy's lower. So if you add, if Comcast is obligated to pay $21,000 a year, and you turn around and ask Verizon to pay $40,000 a year, they're going to say, you're putting us at a competitive disadvantage. We won't do it. So the benefit of having 2 licenses up at the same time or within a year of each other is you can say to both of them, okay, we want $40,000 a year from both of you now, and it's going to be level and it's going to be competitive because you're both doing it at approximately the same time. So yes, there's a benefit to having them coterminous. And 5 years from now be, let's see, 2022, so it's 2027. And February 2027, Comcast is January 2028. That's close enough. You
Close
can
enough,
negotiate
okay.
both of them within a year, and it's not problematic.
Okay. Where are you seeing high definition as far as being able to get that for access channels?
That was exactly what I was going to comment on.
Do you have it in your Comcast license? I didn't check.
No.
All right. Verizon will give you a channel. All we have to do is ask. They'll give it to us. They'll give it to us in something like 270 days, about 9 months. Right now, Verizon takes 2 to 3 years to get it to you. Verizon makes you pay for the encoders and the decoders you have to put in at every remote origination site. It's about $10,000 a site. So if you have 3 or 4 of them, it's going to be $30 or $40. Comcast, 30, 40,000, sorry. Comcast makes you pay for that. Verizon doesn't. They may wrap that up in their charges and pass it through anyway. But right now, Verizon does not make you pay for the encoders and the decoders. So the answer is you can get, and you will get, an HD channel from Verizon. EPGs are another thing, electronic program guides. No cable operator really is doing that yet. Well, I should say none. I shouldn't say that. RCN has done it. And Comcast has tried it in a couple places, but there are still some technical complications. You have to go out to a third-party vendor. It's expensive. It's difficult technically to make it work. So what you can get from the most you can expect to get now as far as an EPG goes is just a delineation of which PEG channels are being shown at a particular time. You won't see programs, but you might see education channel, government channel, public channel breakdown on your guide, but that's the most you can expect to get now from that technology platform. Do you have an iNet, a municipally, do you have an iNet that's operated by the either cable company?
No, we have town-owned fiber.
Good. Completely owned and operated by the town?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. The reason I say good is because those communities, there's still a lot out there that have the iNet operated by well, this is Verizon, by Comcast, are facing the problem that Comcast is getting out of the business, is trying to turn it over to the community, and the community will have to lease it or pay for it. You don't have that problem, so that's not an issue. Good to hear.
Are they getting into monetizing things like the drops they provide us and stuff like that?
Verizon won't. Verizon's not doing any of that yet. Comcast is. You're talking about the free drops that provide a basic service to public buildings and schools. Comcast has started billing towns for that now if you want it. It's not a lot of money, you know, basic services, I don't know what, 30 or 40 bucks a month. So most communities are certainly willing to pay that if they want it, but a lot of them are finding they don't even want it anymore. Verizon will still give them to you for free if you want them.
Yeah, we can't. The school department, I represent the school department. We canceled all of ours because we weren't using them.
Yeah, a lot of communities are doing that. But if you still want them from Verizon, you can have them. Let me think, what other issues are out there? We've talked about HD, talked about EPG.
I guess following up with that is, you know, we're talking about having these assets that could be charged against the town. And if we were to get that HD channel, even though it's free, is that something that those encoders could be charged against us at some point?
Well, they're not under the FC. They would not be a cost that would be charged under the 2019 FCC order and decision.
Okay.
So it's not considered a you know, an add-on or a pass-through cost under that decision. Possibility is that the FCC might add things in, but because of the current administration, I doubt that's going to happen.
Thank you.
I don't
We're
think.
able to get the HD channel from Verizon, and Comcast does have the level playing field. I didn't see it in the Verizon contract. Are we able to go back to Comcast before 2028 to get an HD channel from them?
No, it doesn't work that way. It works the other way around.
I thought so.
Verizon could say, we don't have to give you one because it's not in the Comcast license. Wait till next renewal. I don't think they'll do that. I've seen them give HD channels where the other carrier doesn't do it. So I think that's typically not a problem.
So we can't even ask Comcast.
You can ask, but the answer is going to be no.
Okay.
Cable companies do not go back in the middle of a license and renegotiate anything ever.
Unless it's in their favor.
You know, they just, I mean, from a business point of view, from a corporate mentality point of view, you know, you've got a 10-year, it's like a lease. You know, I got a 10-year lease. Don't bother me. I want to count on this. I rely on this. I've got this for 10 years, you know, don't come back and try to renegotiate. We're not going to do it. So that's the same way with cable companies. I mean, you can always ask, yes, but you won't get one. You won't get any more concessions out of Comcast until 2028.
You had mentioned that some of the sample business plans that you provided in the email to Carrie that she passed on were a little too much, too broad. You don't think we need to supply something as comprehensive as that?
What you basically need is budgets, and you don't need if you want to project your budgets out, your operating budget out for 5 years, that's not too difficult. 10 years is a little more difficult because it's pretty unforeseeable. But I usually say, a budget for 2 years or 3 years and let it go at that. Just give them an idea of what your annual operating costs look like, and an equipment list for 5 years. When I said that some of the budget or some of the business plans I submitted to you were sort of overly formalized, a lot of them begin off, like with a description of the town, and it's located at 495, and MBTA runs through it, and we were founded in 1742. We had mills here, and I mean, you can do all that if you want. That's nice to know, but not essential. So.
Are there any issues with how Verizon calculates their gross annual profit margin, or what's included and what's not included?
No, the definition for gross annual revenues we use in Verizon licenses is typically the same one that we use for Comcast. We do include, it doesn't matter when you're at 5%. Well, maybe it does. You may still get a little bit more. Advertising and home shopping in their definitions as well. The conventional wisdom is that adds about 0.3 to 0.5 of an additional percentage of money, of income, when you include that in the definition of gross annual revenues. So you get a tad more there. No, Verizon uses pretty much the same language as Comcast.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question for representing those of us who know nothing about this whole area. Is if we got a HD channel from Verizon and we didn't have one from Comcast, is that something that we can operate with? It's probably a good question for Ryan. Or do you need separate sets of equipment for both?
I believe it's something that we would be able to operate with, and it would basically split out one of our channels. It would be our main channel that we would give access priority for HD, and then Comcast would operate as normally with the 3 standard definition channels as it currently is. They would provide us with some more of the tools, the tool set essentially that enables us to put that HD channel out, but it wouldn't affect our current operations.
And most communities that get an HD channel devote it to one channel, and it's usually devoted to the G channel, with the conventional wisdom being that's where you need that really high definition to look at all those pie charts and those financial tables and, you know, the FinCom meetings and the town meetings with all the overhead projector stuff and the fine print on, you know, zoning bylaws and things like that. So that seems to be the place that it is best used, but it's entirely up to the town. You can put it on any channel you want, but your Verizon subscribers will get it and your Comcast subscribers won't. Give Verizon an edge, maybe. Can any of you tell me what the approximate number of subscribers is for the two different, does anyone have that number by any chance?
No, I didn't bring those up.
It's easy to get. All you do, you get it. In fact, let's see, this is April 20th. So you would have got a check at the end of March, or maybe early April from each one of them, from Verizon and Comcast. And it will be for a certain amount of money, and it will say this is your check for license fees. And the license fees are required by state law, and it requires the cable company to pay annually at the end of March 50 cents per subscriber as of December 31st of that year. So you can look at the amount of check and just do the math. If
Just
it's,
divided by the 50 cents. Okay.
yeah. So if it's, you know, if you get a check for $1,000, that's what's that? 2,000 subscribers.
Wouldn't be the check you get, Ryan. It's the one the town gets.
The one the town gets and passes
Yeah.
over. Correct. Yeah.
No, they keep that one.
And you're allowed to. That doesn't have to be spent for cable purposes at all. You can use it to fill potholes if you want. Most towns just give it to cable access, but you don't have to. It's up to the town. That number would be useful to know. And let me tell you a little bit about a little bit more in depth about where the process with Verizon will lead us. By the way, when you had your Comcast renewal in 2018, did you prepare a business plan of anything like that? You must have prepared budgets and equipment lists and stuff like that, kind of like a 10-year plan.
Yes, we did.
And would you be able to send that to me? And in particular, I'm thinking about the capital, your 10-year capital plan that you gave to Comcast. And the reason I'm asking this is you may want to just rely on that in negotiating with Verizon, or you may want to update that for Verizon. But when you look at capital, when you look at the overall capital needs of a community like yours, like Wilmington, let's just say it's over 10 years, we're going to say it's $500,000 in capital, total needs, okay? And you've got two carriers like Verizon and Comcast. My approach is always, you figure out the proportion of subscribers. If it's 50-50, it makes it easy. That means you ask for half of that capital, half of the 500,000 from one, and you ask for half from the other. If it's 60-40, you divide it up proportionally. If it's 70-30, you get 70% from one and 30% from the other. So what I'm thinking of here is, and then there's an additional complication because Verizon only does 5-year licenses, okay? So the approach that I usually take that simplifies it and seems to be equitable is you figure out the percentage of Comcast with Verizon. Let's just say it's 50-50, okay? So we have a 10-year capital plan somewhere where we either had one in 2018 or we'll have a new one now, all right? Say it's going to be 500,000 and say it's 50-50. That means this time with Verizon, we're going to ask them for $250,000, the equivalent of $250,000 over 10 years, all right? Because it's only a 5-year license, you just divide that in half. You assume that it's sort of two back-to-back 5-year Verizon licenses. In other words, this time with Verizon, if our total capital needs 500,000 and Verizon share is 50%, that would mean Verizon's 10-year share is $250,000 and its 5-year share is $125,000 in capital this time around. You see that approach? That's kind of how I simplify the maze of having two licenses that are not in sync, and also one of them that does 10 years and the other does 5 years. Kind of simplifies the process and the thought process so you can kind of figure out relatively easily what looks like a fair and equitable distribution between the two of them.
Makes sense.
I'm not sure if it will be that easy, because some equipment, has a certain life.
Yep.
And if the life is more ending up in the 7th year rather than the first 5, when we put the budget together for the Comcast thing, I just don't know if there was more in one period than another, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
We can't necessarily ask for new equipment that's only 2 years old or 3 years old.
No, I understand, and we'll just have to smooth that over as best we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, did you find what was submitted for the Comcast?
No, actually, I've been searching through folders and folders,
All right.
trying to
well,
find.
I found the budgets and the ascertainment letter that we had prepared
You did.
for the town on their behalf. So it's something that I should share with everybody so that we can use that as a starting point. I think with this related to the budgets, we should look to see what we thought we were going to have for budgets and see what it actually was, to see if we undersold it or not. At the time we did the Comcast and we looked at subscribership, it was at a point where subscribership was still going up. And I'm not sure that that's the case right now, where people are starting to cut the cord. So, I mean, it's more important right now that we get the 5%, where so many people are cutting the cord. We can't really afford to lose that any kind of a percentage on that.
What you can expect from Verizon is Verizon's a little easier to negotiate money with than Comcast. I think they still feel a little guilty by coming in and only giving you 5 years. And when they first started doing that, we used to leverage them for more money. They'd say, we'll offer you 50, and we'd say, how about 80,000? Oh, okay, we'll give you that. A lot of times it was more than what Comcast is paying. I think you can still work them for a little bit. Yeah, I think you can still work on them a little bit like that and play that guilt for the 5-year thing. But they just are generally easier with money. They are more persnickety about certain other things. And it's not just the 5-year license that we hit them up for more money on. There's another thing that they insist on putting in their licenses now and have for about 3 years, and that is an escape clause. They say that they want to be able to terminate the license and get out in 3 years or 4 years if business isn't good enough for them. And that was non-negotiable. We couldn't fight them on that. So we accepted it and we said, okay, fine. 2 things. 1, you give us more money, you buy that right. And 2, you agree to pay all that money before you leave. So for that reason too, we've been able to hit Verizon up for more money, more capital. Let me just curious about one thing. I'm gonna do a little bit of math here. Just to give you some idea what you can expect, I think. Let me see here. Where's my calculator? All right. So $381,022.50. How did that's the cap they got from Verizon. How did you arrive at that number? I'm just curious. Do you remember?
No.
And George was the only one that was present the last time. I think everybody else is new this time.
Okay.
Ken's done them in the past, but we're all the rest of us are new.
So that breaks down to $381,022.50 over 15 years, breaks down to $25,401.50 per year. So right now from Verizon, you're getting approximately $25,000 a year. From Comcast, you're getting $21,000 a year. I would say that Verizon, you're going to get the 5%. They'll match that. I would say that you could probably squeeze Verizon if you need more capital and you can justify it. You could get 35,000 a year out of them or something like that without a lot of squawking. If you need more money and you can justify it. So well, I'm sure you can do that.
Yeah, well, I think Ryan's part in this would be to put together a list of all the things that they're covering now. Because I think coverage has increased over the years. The number of municipal departments that are requesting to have the coverage because of COVID.
Mhm.
Has that increased, Ryan?
Yes.
So if we can show the increase in the coverage that we're doing with staffing and with volunteers, that would help justify the equipment needs too.
Absolutely. I mean, then is then and now is now, and it's a different world now than it was 3 years ago. That's for sure.
So we definitely need to make sure that we take advantage of this unfortunate pandemic that has put us into a new world, and our needs are now different.
There's also the potential of the new town school administration building, although it's not a given, and it may not occur within the 5-year license window as well. I'm not sure how that will go to play because we'll need to outfit a meeting room and whatnot in that new location.
Was that in your Comcast ascertainment capital needs?
No.
No. All right.
This is a new venture.
Okay. So that's legit. You can include that in. If you think it's going to be partially within the 5 years and partially not, doesn't matter. Put it in. You know, we can talk about it.
Because there's no other new, well, there's the senior center. I don't know if that would have a meeting space or something that could potentially have needs.
Senior Center has been used in the past for monthly meetings of the Commission on Elderly Services.
Yeah.
So that space could certainly use outfitting as well.
I've been telling Terry she seriously needs to consider media rooms in any new facilities. So
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I should caution you about, and I told you a minute ago, you ought to be able to get more, and Verizon has been giving more, at least up to now or up to recently. But there also is a possibility they're going to look at level playing field and say, sorry, our competition only pays $21,000 a year and we're paying $25,000 a year. So we don't want to give you much more than that. That's a possibility. We'll see. Verizon's a moving target, to tell you the truth.
Ryan, do you know how much we have lost in subscribership in both of them?
Since 2017, I know that our the income based on these franchise fees has decreased over 10%. From the math that I did a few days ago.
Yeah, that's consistent with other communities. Some places that there's a lot of growth in building, it absorbs that, it cushions that loss, and you get more subscribers coming on just from new subdivisions, although not as many as you would. So it's up and down all over the place. There are some communities where people have come back, and there's more now just because of the pandemic. Because people are doing everything remotely and they're watching meetings more and that sort of thing. So we'll see. Is Wilmington a growth community? Are you building new subdivisions, that kind of thing, or?
More commercial growth right now than anything.
we do have you know, that project across from in North Wilmington with a number of units, also on Lowell Street. I think where there's going to be an increase of some growth in there residentially.
Well, of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but every community is facing the same question, and that is, what's it going to be in 5 years? What's it going to be in 3 years? How much are we going to be getting in 3 years? How much in 5 years? How much in 8 or 9 years? There is, as you may know, an act before the Massachusetts state legislature, the general court, that would provide an income stream to local communities from fees imposed upon carriers who provide internet access. So anyone providing internet access would pay a fee that's something like the 5% fee you pay for cable. Part of that goes to the state, part of that would go to communities to make up for the loss from cord cutting and people getting their video content from streaming platforms. So that's a possibility. We're not too close to that yet, but it's in a committee. It's being seriously considered. And there's an organization called Mass Access. Ryan, you may know about that. Maybe some
Yeah,
of the
David Gautier was trying to call me 5 minutes ago. And yeah, it's a tax on those over-the-top streaming services because you can't tax the internet. Internet is free public right of way.
Yeah.
But you can, but none of these streaming services such as Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime have any real taxes associated that would benefit the town. So if this act were to go through, it would be a huge thing. It'd be very beneficial. And we have support from Dave Robertson, our representative here for that.
Right. So there's, I mean, that's a glimmer of hope on the horizon.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's the second or third time they've tried to push this through. So hopefully.
It's a little more serious now because the problem is compounded more and it's becoming more and more an issue for more and more communities. So as that worsens, perhaps the legislature will feel more pressure to act.
I'd be glad to share some of that information with everyone as well. It's not directly related to these negotiations, but it is really, really interesting. And any support we can get for these sort of measures is really appreciated.
So
I'd be curious to receive some information on that.
what I would suggest to you for purposes of sort of planning is to think about a date for your public hearing. The best time for a public hearing is early fall, when the weather is still nice. Maybe by then we'll be having public meetings again. I don't know, although Zoom is working for public hearings, but the attendance to me seems to be a lot lower than when you have them in person.
What attendance?
Yeah, what attendance? Sometimes there aren't many people attending. But the public hearing is kind of the culmination of things. It's like your graduation and your coming of age, if you will, for ascertainment. You have your public hearing, you make your presentation, and you start to negotiate. So a good time for that is sometime in the fall. And you might think about trying to pick a date now and then working towards getting your ascertainment done as you approach that. If you're going to do surveys, you can think about working up a survey in the spring and summer. If you want to do that, and surveys are helpful, I think. If you want to do that, let me look at what your survey says before you send it out, because I think there's some parts of a survey that are helpful and useful, and other parts are not particularly useful for negotiation purposes. They might be informative, but they won't necessarily aid us in our negotiations. Verizon is less survey responsive, I think, than Comcast. I always recommend surveys when you're doing Comcast because they conduct their own telephone surveys, and they always come in a negotiating table saying, our survey tells us nobody in town wants to pay another penny for cable rates, so we're not going to give you any more than you've got now, blah, blah, blah. And then if you have your own survey and it's properly worded, you can say to them, yeah, but our survey showed that when people told what they could get for more money, a lot of people agreed to it. So if you follow me, the survey is really a counterpoint with Comcast. I haven't ever had that problem with Verizon, so I don't know that you need to do that or not, but you might want to. It might still be informative. It might still help you. It might guide you and inform our negotiations with Verizon. That's up to you. It's, as I say, it's purely optional.
We do have a WCTV survey out right now, but it's more focused on what WCTV provides, not in terms of what the cable provider is offering. So it's a very different sort of thinking there.
much time should we leave between the public meeting and the end of the license term to account for negotiation time?
That's a good question. I don't think you're going to need much more than 2 or 3 months with Verizon. You're already up to 5%. That's often the most difficult to negotiate. If you're at 3, going up to 5 is going to be a $2 increase for everybody in town. If you have a $100 cable bill, that's sometimes a little more difficult to negotiate. Capital is different. It gets spread out over all the subscribers in a different way, and the added costs of going from 380,000 spread out over subscribership of like 7 or 8,000 people. Added costs are only going to be 20 or 30 cents, so it's a little more easy to negotiate capital. I don't think it's going to take a lot of time to negotiate with Verizon, to tell you the truth.
If we get surveys and public meetings wrapped up by, say, early November, we're in good shape.
I would say so, yes. Yeah, it's let's see, it's February 25th. Yeah, so you've got 2 months into the new year. And I just have not had a lot of negotiating difficulties with Verizon. We often do it in 1 meeting or 2. We come to a general understanding the first meeting, and then we'll go back and run it by the board, because they're the issuing authority, and the Comcast and Verizon guy goes back and runs it past his corporate people, meet again next time and say, yeah, it's a deal. Verizon is a lot less complicated in many ways and more complicated in other ways.
Are the negotiations by Zoom right now?
Yes. Yes, they are.
And I guess the same goes for the public hearing by Zoom.
We've been doing public hearings by Zoom, yes. And somebody commented that, if there is any attendance or something like that. And I will tell you, we don't have much. We don't have many people coming to the public hearings by Zoom. But I will also tell you that in recent years, we haven't had many people coming to public hearings anyway, because so many of the issues you had 10 or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, like poor signal quality, and bad customer service, you're on the phone for 8 hours and then you talk to somebody from Greenland, that thing. Those issues have all been resolved pretty much. Signal quality is a lot better. We've got digital, now in most of the cable service that's provided. So the picture quality is a lot better. The equipment's better. You don't have so much downtime. With fiber optic lines, you don't have the same problems with bad weather that you used to with the coax lines. With fiber optic, it's a lot quicker to find a break in the system and get it fixed quickly. So things are a lot better now than they used to be, and therefore you have fewer complaints, and therefore you have fewer people coming to the hearings. General trend.
At what point should we be looking at, excuse me, like municipal departments and other users that could put together what their needs are? And during the last Comcast, we had a number of letters that were talking about needs, and should we do the same?
You should do the same, absolutely. There may be different needs now. Your library, your senior center, your historical society, your public safety department, schools may have new needs that were not worked up in 2018 or in the years before, because you started in 2016, probably 2017. So yeah, I'd reach out to them now. Tell them we have a new license coming up. It's Verizon. It's only 5 years, but we have the opportunity to negotiate for new future cable needs. Do you have any? You want us to know? Let us know. Send us a letter, call us up, come to a public hearing. You should get something in writing from municipal departments. Yes, we need a new X, Y, and Z here. Or yes, we would like this type of equipment there. That sort of thing. You don't promise it to them. Just tell them that it's on the table and it's a possibility.
Right.
If you ask for, a lot of times you get, I had one town where they came back and they wanted $4 million worth of stuff. And I had to say, that's probably a little too high. We pared that down to about 300,000, which is a lot more reasonable. So don't promise them that they'll get it.
Yeah.
and tell them it's got to be reasonable and justifiable, because the way you win with these things is you make a presentation that's reasonable and justifiable. That's what we're looking for.
So Ryan, would you be able to put together a list of people that have been reaching out to you that have needs, and that way when we put together a letter, we could send it out?
It's interesting because we're talking more about needs that would lead to operational expenses, perhaps more than capital expenses, because not many of these outside organizations have their own AV equipment or have requested any AV equipment. It's all at their disposal by rental or borrowing from WCTV. So I'm wondering.
Well, if you have increased
what's-
coverage needs and don't have the equipment to cover it, you would then be able to have more equipment.
Right. Sure.
The other thing too is, although you didn't hear me say this, the cable companies don't care. They call part of the grant capital and part of it, annual operating grants, the 5%. They don't care if you take money from capital and apply it to your annual operating if you need to do that, if you have operational needs, or on the other way around. They don't care if you take money out of the 5% and put it into a capital reserve fund. They're not gonna care about
That's
it.
news to me. We are very specific about how we break that out and how that money is spent.
Well, I'm not saying your municipal accounting folks might not want a very strict delineation between what is capital and what is not, but the cable company doesn't care. So you could get 5%, and I don't know what that would be, but let's say it's $200,000 a year, all right, from Verizon. And you could be getting $25,000 a year in capital, all right? $225,000 a year income. If you look at that income stream and you want to say, we are going to take not just 25,000, but 50,000 out of that and put it into a capital reserve fund through municipal accounting and appropriations, and however you do that, the cable company's not going to care. They won't care if you take part of the money from one and put it into another. I'm not saying you don't have accounting and and town meeting votes and funding requirements you have to comply with, but the cable company won't care. You can call it whatever you want and process it however you want it. But we're at the 5% cap for income. If you need more income than what you get for 5%, if you need more of that 200,000 income from Verizon, there isn't anything anywhere that says you can't, and you're getting capital in the same time, an annual capital. There isn't anything anywhere that says you can't take $5,000 or more out of that capital grant every year of the 25,000 and call it operating funds and process it, excuse me, handle it accounting wise and fund wise, and treat it as operating funds.
When we did the Comcast negotiations, they didn't want to look at any past budgets to see if the money was spent the way it was supposed to be spent.
Nope, they don't care. What they care about is, and the only thing they care about is it cable related? You can't take that money and go out and build a ballpark or fill potholes,
Right.
or other municipal needs. It's got to be cable related, and that doesn't mean computers for schools. It means stuff that has to do with provision of cable TV. Okay. Computers can do it if they're connected to the cable system and you can watch cable over the computer. You could do that. But generally, we're talking about TV equipment. Okay.
Prior to the Comcast negotiations, there was a belief at the cable station that at some point that they would buy their own building. So they were putting monies aside, and they had a lot of money in the bank. And we
Good.
thought that that was probably not a good thing to go into negotiations having all this money. And we had really no intention of buying a building. We had a nice building, a nice lease. So we started really putting together capital projects that had been neglected for a number of years. And where are we with our savings right now? Do we have too much savings?
That's a question we've spoken about with the board many times, is to how, and I guess that's something that Mr. Hewitt can inform us on, is do they look at these numbers that we have in savings and what assets we currently have? Do we need to do some spending down if we have a surplus of money?
The answer is yes, they do. Although Comcast, the answer is yes, Comcast does. I haven't seen any evidence Verizon even bothers to look, to tell you the truth. But what I would tell you is this. It is always justifiable, and I've always argued that any access corporation now ought to have a reserve fund of at least 1 year operating budget for emergencies, because we don't know what's going to happen with access. The future is uncertain. So whatever your annual your annual budget is, say it's 350,000 or 300,000, I have always been able to successfully argue that it is prudent for an access corporation to have a 1 year operating budget in reserve, and that should not be held against you.
Okay.
Beyond that, if you have a particular project to which your reserve funds are earmarked, such as the construction of a new studio or a new classroom in a school that's going to have training, or whatever other kinds of capital, large scale capital projects you might have, if you are saving funds and earmarking for that, that's okay too. They don't object if you tell them we're going to build a new studio, it's going to be 500,000, we got 450 now, so that's why we've got all this money. That's okay. What you don't want is to have, and this happened a couple places, we discovered, I won't name the towns, but I was negotiating 1 year and I just happened to say, oh, by the way, do you have any money in reserve? Yeah, we got $1.5 million. Are you going to spend it? No. And, and they're saying, oh, we need $300,000 more to do this, that, and the other thing. And I said, wait a minute, what is Comcast going to say when you say we need $300,000 and Comcast says to you, we got $1.5 million, go get it there. So anything that you've got in reserve, first of all, the 1 year budget is legit and justifiable and completely prudent and reasonable. And then beyond that, if it's earmarked for any capital project, it will not be held against you. And with Verizon, I would say as well, as I did a moment ago, I've never even known them to come in and ask, how much do you have? Or to come in like Comcast does and say, we checked and we discovered you have X amount, So do you know how much you have?
Not offhand.
Okay.
About 250 in capital reserves, another 140 or so in the checking account, but that's the operating budget. So.
Okay. That doesn't seem to me to be inordinate. Okay. Especially now, you said that there was talk about a future studio, but you don't really have any plans in doing that. Okay. Fair enough. But, there may be other projects that 250 could be earmarked for, or maybe it's legitimate that Verizon will say, well, you've got some of that funding that you can have, you've got some of the capital on hand now, you don't need as much from us, I mean, the bottom line is that whatever we get out of them, the subscribers are going to pay for. So the board will probably have some reluctance to be told that what we're asking for is going to increase rates. The question is how much. If it's only 20 or 30 cents or 40 cents, no big deal. If it's $3 or $4, then people do notice that. So we will avoid those large jumps like that. And with a lot of subscribers, it's easy to do. If you've got, my guess is you probably have 5,000 or 6,000 subscribers for each one, maybe more. And that's a large number. across which to distribute those costs, particularly the capital costs. So it keeps the per subscriber cost down when you have a large market like you have here.
During our conversation, I did discover the hidden folder with the Comcast renewal 10-year plans and things like that. So I'm happy to forward that along to everyone to have a look at, so we can, and then I'll begin assessing how realistic it is compared to our current needs looking forward.
Great, thank you. I'll get the subscriber count and forward it to everyone.
And George, I'll be curious if what I send over is the same information that you have from.
Yeah, the ascertainment letter is labeled as a draft, so I don't know if that is exactly what was sent out.
Yeah, this is in a folder called 2017 Ideas. So maybe it was just a dream.
So why don't I send it to you, Ryan? You can determine which one is the latest, greatest, and then redistribute.
Very good.
Okay.
That's great, because that'll be helpful.
Should
don't
we
have
also, when Kerry had mentioned putting together the subscriber,
Mhm.
should
I
we
will.
also have John had mentioned that there's going to be some building going on in Wilmington. Should we put together what we expect for growth in the town?
Well, that's not, I mean, that might be interesting to know, but it's kind of speculative too. We don't know how soon all that's going to happen, do we? Or how many people will actually subscribe.
Right.
Right.
Well, no, you
That's-
wouldn't know.
Yeah, you wouldn't know that. So I don't know that that'll be all that helpful. But certainly for our own internal consumption, if we know there's another 5,000 homes coming online in 5 years, you can count on some amount of growth there. It would be less than it might have been 10 years ago, but there will still be some. Some people will get cable. So if there are numbers like that that are out there, just internally, we can look at it and say, all right, we have a reasonable prospect that we're not going to be losing a lot on an annual basis going forward over the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Because there's a growth in population.
I can talk to the planning director and just get a general idea for that internal discussion.
Yeah.
Well, based on the current population and the current subscribership, there would be a certain percentage that we should be able to assume for that new growth.
I mean, with the trend over the past 10 years that I've seen with the subscribers going down, unless we're anticipating a huge number of new residents that would combat that and push it in the opposite direction, I can't anticipate that changing that downward slope.
The pandemic has changed that in some towns, in some communities. But it may take a year or so before you can see the results on that. But I've been told that in a number of places anyway, there's a lot more people watching cable, and a lot more people and fewer people are cutting the cord, and subscribership and interest in cable seems to be rejuvenating a little because of having to live remotely from so many meetings and things.
I think we should just gather the data and see if it's useful, and we'll use it if we can use it.
Yeah.
We do see fluctuations sometimes. Comcast goes up a little, Verizon, they sort of bounce each other up, I guess. Oh, we've got a deal. I know I've hopped cable subscribers myself in the past too.
I have to.
Yeah. But overall, in our budgets, we've budgeted for a decrease, and it's been fairly accurate.
That's the reality in most places.
So do we think we need to do a survey? I'm leaning towards no. I don't know if anybody else thinks so.
I'm leaning towards no also, Ken.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Just that we really need to scour the town departments and find out the ascertainment need, do the public, what do you call it, hearing, of course, and
I would tell you that you need it less for Verizon than for Comcast.
Yeah.
If that's helpful.
Yeah.
As I say, Verizon they never come in trying to challenge the way Comcast does with surveys and, per subscriber cost and all the statistical arguments about why what you want is too much. Verizon doesn't do that. They just say yes or no. A lot of times it's yes.
In terms of the public hearing, is that an opportunity where we would want to bring in some people that are really going to rally for community media and speak their voice, or is it, that's something where I'm sure we could find some strong voiced people to do that sort of thing, or is it more formal than that?
No, it's not. That's what you do. That's what it's for.
stack the house.
So putting more of a, yeah.
Put on a dog and pony show. It's your chance to shine. Show videos of what you do. Sample, the interviews from kids who graduated and went on to work in the media and stuff like that. That's all great stuff.
Okay, I think that's something we can really rise to in terms of finding that community support and bringing them together for this.
And then you combine that with a little pie graph showing how much you currently get and how much more you need and how little it's going to cost, and here's what you're going to get for getting it. And there's you're speaking. It's a sales exercise, and you're trying to sell three different communities. One is the public, because they're going to be paying more if you ask for more. Two is the select board, because they're going to have to grant the license and they're going to have to be on board. And the third is Verizon itself. You got to persuade them that what you want is justifiable and will be properly spent. So you've got three real targets, three audiences you're appealing to at this public hearing. And as I say, treat it as a sales event. You've got a lot to say for yourself for public access in town. A lot of people support it. It does a lot of good stuff. Let us hear about it. The more, the better. That's what it's for. That's how it is most effectively used.
Thank you.
And the other thing too is, I don't know what your relationship with the select board is, but from time to time, it's a good idea to check in with them, send them a report, or maybe have somebody go to a meeting and say, we're negotiating with Verizon. We're thinking of asking for a renewal of the 5%, and we're thinking of having that $25,000 per year go up to $30,000 per year. That'll only be another 15 cents per subscriber, something like that. We just want you to know that, and let us know if you think you can support it. They'll appreciate that. But again, depends on your relationship with the select board, and also whether they're a hands-on board when it comes to things like this, or whether they're just going to be, as a lot of towns they are, just say, come back to us with the license and we'll vote it. Don't know what your board is like, but you have a better sense for that. So if they do want to be in on the loop, be sure you keep them in on the loop.
I think it'd be good for us to just even provide through a memo, a letter, every couple of months where we're at and the progress and where we're going, and in their communication package even.
And make sure they know that what you're talking about is goals, not guarantees. So when you say we'd like to have 25,000 instead of, or 30,000 a year from Verizon instead of 25, we're going to ask for this. It'd be nice to have it. I had one community about 20 years ago where we, right at the beginning, we said, we're going to ask for like $3 million or something like that over 10 years. And the total and the total package. And then we came back to them a couple of years later, and the license was substantially less than that, but everybody agreed it was good, and they voted it down. They wanted that 3 million we had promised 2 years ago. So be careful about that.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some homework before we have a next meeting, then it sounds like. I would be willing to work with someone to come up with a letter to go out to department heads or departments, different departments, and even those that don't have department heads to find out their needs. And send that out before the.
I can certainly do that with you, Carrie.
Okay, because I think that should go out pretty quickly and then we could get the results for the next meeting to talk about.
Yep.
And if we could even have some kind of a draft budget maybe for the next meeting in capital, is that doable, Ryan?
Yes,
Okay,
I'll look over that with Ken, right, Ken?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
great.
Just FYI, I got elected as the president of WZTV this week, so
Oh,
no
congratulations.
one else wanted it.
Nice.
It was much like the pitch for a chair of this committee, so a lot of awkward silence.
That's okay. Congratulations, Ken.
Gee, thanks.
Okay, what else? What else do we need, Attorney Hewig? What's for our next meeting?
Well, it's not necessarily for the next meeting, but Ryan can start thinking in terms of informing the community of what's coming. So you could have crawl script, community bulletin boards, or some kinds of notices, you know, license renewal is coming up. Let your cable committee know if you have suggestions for future need for Verizon. And also if you have complaints about Verizon service, let us know. We need to know that before we negotiate. So you can start to kind of gear up for that sort of thing, Ryan. Because what you want is if there really are compliance issues, and I suspect there won't be, but many, but you want to know about it well ahead of time and not, 2 weeks before the license is up, because it's too late to get them to change then. But the other thing that I should have mentioned at the beginning, although I suspect most of you know this, is that there are 3 things that we can't do we can't negotiate for during license renewal. One of them is rates. We can't negotiate rates down. You'll get complaints from people saying the rates are too high. And what we say is, we're sorry, we don't regulate rates. We can't do that. It's the market that determines that, not us. The second thing we really can't negotiate for or control in the renewal process is programming. That's also supposed to be determined by the market. Although if a lot of people complain and come to the public hearing and say, look, we really want the curling channel, give it to us, that might work. But we can't do that. You can't get it by negotiating. And the third thing, of course, is we don't issue a license for high-speed internet. It's not an internet license. So when people come in to complain about their internet service from Verizon, it's sorry, we can't help you. We'd be happy to direct you towards the Verizon representative over there, but this is not an internet license. It's a cable license. That's all we are negotiating for. So you can expect to hear complaints about all 3 of those, probably mixed in with any others you want. And some of them we can act on and some of them we can't.
We know who our Verizon and Comcast government reps are. I don't know that I know them.
Yes, I have the
Yeah,
names of them.
I have names too.
Verizon is going to be a guy named Paul Train and maybe Neil Connor.
Right.
You probably have already heard from Neil. Spells his name Niall, and I think it's Connor, not O'Connor. But in any event, but Paul Train's guy we're going to negotiate with. I've known Paul for years. He's a reasonable fellow. And the other good thing about Verizon is they're pretty responsive. They're more responsive than Comcast as far as turning licenses around and getting things done. In fact, they're always pushing me. They send me a draft license and then the next day, have you looked at it yet? Comcast, it's like pulling teeth recently during the pandemic. They're so slow trying to get a renewal license draft or getting to review it. It's just been very, very slow going with them. And RCN, well, not RCN, but Charter is the third one, is the worst of all. You don't have to worry about Charter.
No.
You're lucky. You got the 2 best, Comcast and Verizon.
Good. Anything else that we should do before we plan a next meeting?
So part of the homework is I will send Ryan the files that I have
Thanks.
on the Comcast agreement.
Okay.
I think Carrie, you're gonna send us those subscriber numbers too?
Absolutely, I will do that, and I'm gonna work with Ryan on a letter, and we'll get that out within the next probably week and a half or so, Ryan, maybe we can do that?
That's
Didn't take us long.
No, it won't.
How often should we be meeting? Or is there a plan?
If you're asking me, I think monthly meetings probably are going to serve you perfectly adequately at this point.
I agree.
All right. So if we schedule a meeting sometime in May, what is best for people? Does this time work?
Depends on the day of the week for me, so. Of that particular week, so. I mean, today's the 23rd, so if we're looking like it Friday, the 21st, I could do this time frame.
I could do the 21st as well.
I'll be away.
Are you away the whole week, George?
No, I'm going for a weekend down the Cape golfing.
Oh, sweet.
And
Nice.
You need a bag boy?
I'll be away. I will be away that week.
I
Oh, the
need,
28th.
I need one for next week. I'm going to Myrtle Beach.
28th is good for me.
I can do the
28th?
28th.
I can do the 28th.
Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
I don't know whether you need me or want me, but it's clear on my calendar too.
I think we
I don't
would.
necessarily need to be at all of your meetings, but where you've got stuff, kind of finalized and you're ready to move on for the next step in the process, might be helpful for me to be in on those.
Absolutely. I think we want you, especially the first couple of meetings. I don't think we're going to need that many meetings. It doesn't sound like.
I don't think so either. So May 21st, or I should say 28th.
28. Does this time work for everyone?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. May 28th at 10 via Zoom.
Okay, great.
And John, we didn't have any callers, did we, for this entire time?
We have not.
Okay, great. All right. If that is it, I will take a motion to close the meeting.
So
Adjourn.
moved.
Second,
Okay, all those in favor, we have to do a roll call. I'll do it. John O'Neill,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Karen,
yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay, thank you, Attorney Hewitt. You've been so helpful to us.
Thank
Very
you.
helpful.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Nice to meet all of you. I look forward to working with you. And
Thank
you.
you. I do
Thank you.
too.
get a good deal out of Verizon. We will.
You will.
That's great. I like your positivity.
And
Alright.
HD. We got to get the HD.
Right,
We got to be able to get HD from Verizon. Yeah. Okay.
great.
Alright.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.